10 tragic events that created iconic pieces of pop culture. Welcome to Creepshow, where the haunting tales behind iconic pop culture items come to life. In today's episode, we delve into the tragic events that inspired some of the most beloved songs, movies, and inventions. From Christmas classics born out of nuclear fear to beloved toys crafted in the shadow of disaster, prepare to uncover the dark stories that hide behind the things you love. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to join our community of curious minds. Now let's dive into the eerie origins of your favorite pop culture icons. Even though the world can be a horrible place, it always has positive things. It's amazing how often they coincide. Many of the things we rely on daily to bring us happiness were founded on horrific tragedies and agony. Some of the most iconic works of popular culture were produced under extraordinarily depressing conditions. The next time you play Dancing Queen loudly or fiddle with Legos, keep in mind that without the suffering of others, your happiness would not be possible. Do You Hear What I Hear was number 10. Hear What I Hear, Do You? Is among those Christmas tunes that sound like they have been there since Christ's birth. This laid-back song was not created just to honor the religious occasion. In fact, it's only as old as the Monster Mash. Written by Noel Regney and Gloria Shane Baker in reaction to the Cuban Missile Crisis and the prospect of Armageddon, the song first functioned as a plea for peace in the midst of a nuclear standoff. Existential dread ruled the earth for 13 days. The producer took a break from recording while they were in the studio to check if World War III had broken out. Regney and Baker decided to go for a stroll in order to decompress from the events in Cuba. The couple noticed two mothers wheeling strollers full of infants along the route. The song's opening line, "Said the night wind to the little lamb," was written immediately after the songwriters were moved by this fleeting moment of innocence. Although it became a Christian classic, its message of putting aside differences is applicable to all people. You will now be among the few who comprehend the song's reference to Regney and Baker's paranoia. The phrase, a star dancing in the night with a tail as big as a kite," alludes to the nuclear missiles that served as the song's inspiration, despite the fact that many people read it as a reference to the star above Bethlehem. Even now, when Baker and Regney sing the song, the terror in it still makes them cry. Number 9. The Super Bowl halftime show was created by a cult. The Super Bowl inspires greater fervor than anything else. The fervor with which fans support their chosen teams is almost cult-like, as they go to absurd lengths to do so. For years, a true cult has been interwoven into the middle of the most recognized football game of the year, which is why it is so suitable. For the first 30 years, the Super Bowl halftime show included largely local marching bands or jazz luminaries performing classics. Up With People was the only current band allowed to sing. Their songs promoted utopianism and world peace. The Moral Rearmament (MRA) movement, which was established in the late 1960s to halt the expansion of liberal counterculture forces, was the source of such point of view. This explains why a wide range of corporations, including Exxon, Halliburton, Pfizer, and General Electric, were funding this group of stiff-necked people. The conservative ideology also restricted many of the members' liberties. The MRA had complete control over all aspects of their lives. The MRA made the group work out for hours every day until they were completely worn out. The group's gay members were regularly beaten. All forms of sex were severely prohibited. Up With People performed at the Super Bowl 4 times despite the group's toxic culture, leaving those who participated in it abandoned in random towns while on tour. Their productions were extravagant and ridiculous. NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle had had enough of the gimmick by 1986. The NFL went to well-known performers to provide the theatrics, because these halftime shows were so cheesy and campy. New Kids on the Block were the first modern performers to headline the show in 1991. Michael Jackson's 1993 performance launched the Super Bowl halftime show into the stratosphere, setting the stage for fashion faux pas and the Left Shark decades later. Number 8. After his family died, Stephen Colbert became a comedian. Stephen Colbert is one of the most well-known comedians of the last few decades, whether he is hosting The Late Show, The Daily Show, or The Colbert Report. Although he has made millions of people happy, Colbert's personal life is full of heartache. He turned to humor as a coping mechanism for the day he lost both of his siblings and his father. Eastern Airlines Flight 212 encountered dense fog on September 11, 1974. The pilots were taken aback by the fog since they had been preoccupied with a chat. The plane crashed because they did not know what their settings were. Out of the 82 persons on board, 72 passed away right away. Stephen, the youngest of 11 children, was the only one living with his parents at the time of the collision. 3 more people perished later from their injuries. While driving home from the burial, Stephen saw that one of his sisters was laughing so hard that she toppled over in her seat. Stephen was just 10 years old when he helped his mother get through her sadness. Stephen realized then that comedy has the power to dispel all hopelessness. Listening to some of the records his brothers left behind piqued his interest in comedy. Stephen devoted the next 8 years of his life to comedy. Lately, he has also experienced some success with it. Number 7. Abba was created by Nazi experimentation. Loved and adored, Abba is a fun, lively disco band. That doesn't apply to the Nazis, but if the Nazis hadn't occupied Norway, one of the band's 4 members would not have existed. The Nazis instructed the soldiers to start having as many children as possible with Norwegian Aryan women as part of a program that began in 1940. Annie Fried Lyngstad, also known as Frida, was one of the thousands of children born as a result of this procedure. Many of these children were seized from their parents and placed in re-education rooms. Children would live, eat, and play under the watchful eyes of Nazi soldiers in these familiar ancient rooms. The program ultimately turned into mass kidnapping as the Third Reich invaded neighboring nations. The abducted kids were taken to orphanages, from which they were unable to free themselves, even if they so desired. These children were sent back to their homes after the war if they were not racially pure. If they were put to death. Because of their ties to the Nazis, many of the moms and infants experienced social exclusion. Frida and her mother were forced out of town when Frida was a charming little 17 months old. Even in Sweden, Frida continued to feel alone and without a true home. She began dating Benny Andersson in 1971. He invited her to play with Agnetha Falskog and Björn Ulvaeus in his new band, Abba. Ultimately, Abba outperformed the Nazis in their conquest of Europe and America. Number 6. Brick by brick, Lego rebuilt the founder's life. In the US, Legos are recognized by a colloquial term for bricks that are so iconic of childhood that the firm has sold over 400 billion of these bricks. Due to their success, the corporation has been able to expand into very successful video games, motion pictures, and even theme parks. Nevertheless, as anyone who has ever tripped over a Lego during the night will attest, they can be extremely painful. Beneath the surface of whimsicality, the early days of Lego were shaped by a string of misfortunes befalling its founder, Ole Kirk Christensen, a mere carpenter in his hamlet in the early 1900s. He made stools, ladders, and furniture at his workshop. When his son unintentionally put some wood chips on fire in the shop in 1924, the business came to an end. The fire spread and destroyed the Christensen family's home and workshop. Despite his financial ruin and current homelessness, Christensen made the decision to press on. He soon faced 2 further challenges. The 1929 crash of the U.S. stock market set off a worldwide downturn. Then, Christensen's spouse passed away in 1932. Due to personal and financial setbacks, he had to fire the majority of his employees and scale up his business. His social worker made the case that the company needed to stray from selling furnishings. He ought to resort to toys instead. They were less expensive to produce, needed less wood, and might even lift Christensen's spirits. For a long while, Christensen hardly turned a profit. He even filed for bankruptcy before his brothers saved him. Christensen's factory burned once more in the 1940s during the German occupation of Denmark. He had to move from wood to plastic due to a lack of resources. Christensen was able to create toys in unprecedented quantities because to this, including a line of interlocking bricks. Number 5. The assassination of Robert Kennedy. Modified hip-hop. Robert Kennedy's terrible and unexpected death had a profound impact on 1960s politics. The indirect impact of his passing on hip-hop, nevertheless, might be the event's true legacy. Michael Viner worked as an advisor to Robert Kennedy's campaign in the late 1960s. It was there that he met Rosie Greer, the football star who was Bobby Kennedy's bodyguard. During the assassination, Greer was the one who forced the gun from Ciaron's grasp. With the intention of collaborating with Kennedy in Washington, Greer and Viner joined the campaign. Greer and Viner remained in California when Kennedy passed away. When losing their jobs, the two men entered the film industry. Vader composed the soundtrack for The Thing with Two Heads, a terrible B-movie in which Greer featured. A fan of surf rock, Vader got the band to record a cover of Burt Whedon's Apache. The incredible bongo band's rendition of Apache would go on to be known as the national anthem of hip-hop. Made popular by DJ Kool Herc, Apache was the go-to song for his block parties. They had a minor hit with bongo rock on the soundtrack. Building on that success, Vader formed the group Incredible Bongo Band. Turntablism was invented by Grand Wizard Theodore, who transformed it into the sound of the genre with his debut song Scratched. It would later be sampled by hundreds of musicians, including MC Hammer, Grandmaster Flash, Africa Bambaataa, Nas, Kanye West, and LL Cool J. At number 4, the scene of Chestburster in Unknown assassinated its maker. This is among the creepiest plot twists ever seen in a movie. Cain, the generous man, takes a seat to eat. He is going about his business when all of a sudden he gets a horrible pain in his side. His body gives way. He eventually dies at a way too young age from his bursting insides. That is the horrifying tale of Cain and Dan O'Bannon, the screenwriter for Alien, who came up with the sequence. He took inspiration from his personal battle with Crohn's illness for the well-known chestburster scene. One day, O'Bannon and Chris Foss were consuming fast food. The illness caused O'Bannon to experience intestinal issues. He characterized the encounter as a small beast inside of him. Later on, in talks with H.R. Geiger, O'Bannon expressed his want for his stomach agony to simply go away. One of the most horrifying scenes in film history was created by combining these two concepts. In a horrible twist of irony, O'Bannon met the same end as Cain. O'Bannon's gastrointestinal ailment was misdiagnosed for an extended period of time. Despite having stomach issues on and off for his whole life, he waited until it was too late to seek appropriate medical attention. O'Bannon passed away from Crohn's disease in 2009. He was just 63. Number 3. The Lord of the Rings. Due to 2 world wars, it exists. In actuality, The Lord of the Rings is not a fantasy novel. It may contain orcs, wizards, and elves, but the ultimate story of good versus evil, the corrupting nature of authority, and the destructive force of power is still based on J.R.R. Tolkien's personal struggles. The well-loved trilogy is a barely concealed allegory for the unparalleled devastation of World War I. There are clear connections between the books and the conflict. Other similarities are more incidental. For instance, Gandalf's well-known cry, "You shall not pass," is a rephrasing of the Verdun battle cry, "They shall not pass." Tolkien's connections with other troops served as a major inspiration for Samwise Gamgee. These friendships were also a major factor in the completion of the stories of Tolkien. He gave 3 former classmates and troops access to an early version of Middle-earth in order to lift his spirits. Tolkien felt compelled to complete his novel in their memory after 2 of those soldiers lost their lives in the Battle of the Somme. However, the sorrow did not keep Tolkien's vision alive for very long. It was only after another world war that he became motivated again. It came time for Tolkien's son to serve his country during World War II. South Africa served as the station for Christopher Tolkien. To keep Christopher from getting bored, J.R.R. delivered him bits and pieces of the stories. No matter how intimate Tolkien's texts were, success was never guaranteed. At first, he intended for the trilogy to be published as a single, massive, epic book. Any chance that the text would have been a phenomenon would have been severely harmed by its over 1,000 pages. It would also have been extremely costly due to its thickness. It seems unlikely that many would have had much extra money to throw down on a hobbit's epic quest given the time the book was written, which was following World War II and the state of the economy at the time. Owing to World War II's paper shortage, the publisher demanded that the book be divided into thirds. This made the books more affordable and consequently more widely read. Number 2. Luke Skywalker's father is Darth Vader due to cancer. One of the most iconic scenes in any movie is Darth Vader telling Luke Skywalker that he is Luke's father, even if the remark is frequently misquoted. According to some, this line completely alters the course of the series. Return of the Jedi would not have been nearly as powerful without Vader's sacrifice and forgiveness. Since it plays such a crucial role in the films, one would think that this was always the idea. The original playwright had recently passed away, therefore the sentence was actually written at the last minute. George Lucas decided he didn't want to write the sequel once Star Wars became successful. Leigh Brackett took over the task from him. Despite having a deadly cancer that would take her life in a few months, she managed to finish writing a script before passing away. George Lucas could not have imagined her direction for the film. She imagined Vader to be the proprietor of a steel fortress defended by gargoyles, demons, and a lava moat. Some of these concepts would be included in later franchise films. Lucas revised the text after learning of Leigh Brackett's passing, but at the time he believed the castle was absurd. Upon rewriting the screenplay, Lucas originally conceived of numerous noteworthy moments from the film, such as Han becoming trapped in carbonite and the appearance of Boba Fett. The concept to transform Star Wars into a cosmic game of family feud was the most significant of all the adjustments. Number 1. The strange true story that inspired Freddy Krueger. Arguably the best horror film ever made is Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street. Wes Craven drew inspiration from many sources, including a childhood bully, a disfigured homeless man he happened to see, and the song Dreamweaver. But the darkest was an article that he read in the Los Angeles Times. After the Cambodian genocide, many people fled Asia to settle in California. This is not because it introduced one of the most terrifying characters in cinema history with Freddy Krueger. Rather, it turned the real deaths of untold Southeast Asian men into a blockbuster. With the ocean separating them, their physical risks vanished. Nevertheless, the emotional impact of what they had witnessed followed them. Horrible nightmares were a symptom of the mental tension. They were so horrific that even healthy people would pass away while they slept. People would go days without sleep to avoid any more distress. They would scream one more time before passing away from weariness. This strange pattern was called Sudden Unexpected Death Syndrome, SUDS. This is how 3 refugees from the Khmer Rouge in Los Angeles perished. The local press sensationalized the deaths. In mainland Asia, the disorder's fatalities were too frequent to receive media attention. In Thailand alone, SUDS claimed the lives of 230 persons between 1982 and 1990. That's how many deaths Freddy Krueger could only have imagined committing. Thank you for joining us on this chilling journey through the shadows of pop culture. We hope you found these stories as fascinating as they are eerie. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and share it with your fellow creepy story enthusiasts. Have a story you think we should explore? Drop it in the comments below. We'd love to hear your suggestions. Remember to follow us on social media for behind-the-scenes content and updates on upcoming episodes. Until next time, stay curious, stay spooky, and keep the eerie stories alive with Creepshow.